Welcome to 10 Minutes Read Hub. Today, we're exploring freedom from masturbation through knowledge. I, Peterson O. Abu. Watch, learn, and grow.
You know, struggling with addiction can feel like you're just stuck in a loop, right? Well, today we're going to dig into a Christian self-help book that proposes a really different way out. The idea here isn't just about trying harder or having more willpower. It's about a specific kind of spiritual knowledge. And man, this book does not pull any punches. It gets right to it, you know? It's speaking directly to believers who feel completely stuck, even when they've tried all the usual religious stuff like fasting. Right from the get-go, it frames addiction as something much deeper than just a bad habit. It's a spiritual battle, plain and simple. Okay, so how does this framework actually work? We're going to break it all down into 5 sections. And we'll kick things off with the book's diagnosis of what it says is the real root of the problem. So the author starts out by saying, look, addiction isn't just a physical thing or even a purely psychological issue. Nope, it's what's called a soulish problem. And it all comes down to this incredibly powerful, corrupted desire. A desire so strong it can literally make a person do things they don't want to do. And getting this specific definition of desire is absolutely critical. It's the first big step. The whole framework really is built on this one idea, that desire is the engine driving addiction. So that leads to the obvious next question, right? Where in the world does this desire even come from? Well, to explain where this corrupted desire originates, the book lays out a foundational model of, well, what a person is actually made of. And you gotta pay close attention here, because this model is absolutely central to the whole argument for how to get free. And here's the model. The core idea is that a person is made up of 3 distinct but interacting parts. Literally everything else we're going to talk about, the diagnosis and the solution, it all builds on this one foundation. Okay, take a look at this. What's so interesting here is how it visually breaks down these 3 parts. You've got the innermost spirit, then the soul in the middle, and finally the outermost body. Kind of like Russian nesting dolls or concentric circles, you know? And each one has its own unique job to do. All right, so let's break down what each part does. The spirit, that's described as your innermost being, your conscience, your connection to God, but it can become dormant because of sin. Then there's the body, which is basically the physical shell that just does what it's told. And then, caught right there in the middle, is the soul. Think of it as the control center. It's got your will, your mind, your emotions, and, this is the big one for our discussion, your desire. And the author points to scripture like this one to really hammer home the difference between the soul and the spirit. The argument is simple. The soul is where desire lives, whether that's a desire for good things or bad things. But the spirit, that's the part of you that is meant to actively seek God. Okay, so we have this 3-part model. How does that explain addiction? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The book's diagnosis is that addiction is basically a civil war, a conflict that starts right inside the soul. Now, this is maybe the key insight of the whole book. It argues that when a Christian is born again, their spirit gets regenerated. It's made alive and connected back to God. But, and this is a huge but, their soul, with all its old habits, thought patterns, and messed up desires, it stays the same. And what did that create? An intense inner war. The book calls it the flesh lusting against the spirit. And this chart does a great job of showing the 2 different root causes of addiction according to this framework. So on one side, you've got the flesh. That's the internal corruption of the soul we just talked about. That's a problem that has to be crucified. But then on the other side, you've got demonic influence. That's presented as an external force that takes over the soul, and that has to be cast out. See the difference? 2 totally different problems requiring 2 totally different solutions. All right, so if the main problem is this internal, corrupted soul, what the author calls the flesh, then what's the solution? Well, it's not what you might think. It's not just try harder or pray more. No, the path to real freedom, according to this book, is, well, it's a kind of spiritual death. And here's the crucial point. Freedom isn't something you have to earn. It's something you receive by just accepting a spiritual reality. The whole idea is to start seeing your old self, you know, that part of you driven by the soul's corrupt desires, as being already crucified with Christ. It's a done deal. So then the book lays out this 3-step mindset for how you actually live this out day to day. Step 1, deny yourself. That just means recognizing that addiction is all about serving your own desires instead of God's. Step 2, take up your cross. And that's a daily thing. It's a metaphor for actively, consciously choosing death to those old sinful desires. And then finally, step 3, follow Christ. Basically letting him be in the driver's seat, not your old self. Okay, so we're almost there. The book explains that this spiritual death to self isn't actually the end of the story. It's the beginning. Because once you've got that freedom, you need a whole new set of disciplines to maintain it, to keep it secure. And this is the practical, day in, day out work. The author is super clear on this. Freedom is established by that spiritual crucifixion, but it's maintained by you actively resisting those old desires. It's about not letting sin become the boss of your body again. And to make it super practical, the author gives you a kind of toolkit with 3 key disciplines. The first is carefulness. That means being really intentional about what you see, what you hear, what you think about. The second is watchfulness, just staying alert, keeping an eye out for temptation and shutting it down the second it appears. And the third is prayerfulness, consistently connecting with God to get the strength you need for that daily fight. So when you wrap it all up, what does this lens really show us? By framing addiction as this war between a brand new spirit and an old corrupted soul, this book offers a pretty unique theological way of looking at the internal battles so many of us face. It completely repositions the struggle. It's no longer about a failure of willpower. Instead, it's a spiritual conflict that demands a spiritual solution, one that's all about death to self and living a disciplined new life.